Welcome to OnSoftware. Conversations with thought leaders in software development.
So Glenn, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself and what you're interested in, what you're talking about these days?
My name is Glenn Vanderburg. I am the chief scientist for Relevance Incorporated. With a title like that, you can justify all kinds of crazy stuff. And we're a North Carolina-based consulting firm that specializes in agile methods and tools. And in particular, right now, we're doing a whole lot of work with Ruby and Rails.
Right. And of course, you and I have spent a lot of time together on the No Fluff Just Stuff tour, and we've had many conversations about Ruby. And so
I've been a long-time Java person and sort of got seduced by Ruby over a 3 or 4 year period, and have been doing that almost full time.
And you're not alone.
3 years. That's right.
You're not alone. There have been others who have been seduced by the siren song. And let me ask you this. Obviously, it's a certain amount of a risk, not for you individually, but certainly a certain amount of risk for a company, corporation, et cetera, that is currently in the Java space to consider adopting Ruby and Rails, et cetera. And this risk, granted, has been mitigated some because of JRuby, but still within the Ruby community, there seems to be a very strong flavor of if you're not running Motz's original interpreter, or somehow you're not quite, a full Ruby man.
I don't really see that flavor in the community.
Really? Okay. All right. Seems like it's coming. I see it spring up every once in a while.
Yeah. There are a few people who hold that opinion, but I don't think it's a prevailing opinion.
So why the attraction to Ruby? Why is everyone so excited about this? Aside from the basic fact that Java sucks.
I did not say that.
I did not say that.
Like I said, I was a Java person for a long, long time. I started using Java in '95 and worked with it. And about the time I started learning about Ruby, I was running up against some limitations of Java. And I think some of those limitations had always been there, and I just wasn't doing the kinds of things that really pushed me up against them.
Right.
And in other cases, I think those limitations came along later as the libraries and the whole ecosystem of Java, not just the language, evolved, and the libraries started getting very complex and sometimes buggy and difficult to deal with. And before Java, I had some experience with what we'll call less rigorous or rigid languages, a little bit of Perl, Tickle, even Rex for people who know what that is. And
there's like 3 people in the audience who are like, I know.
That's right. And I started playing with Ruby and started finding ways to use it as a little scripting and automation tool in the background of projects. And at some point, I started to realize that it wasn't just a toy. It was. I was nowhere near pushing its limits, and it could be used for much larger things. And at about the time I was really realizing that, Rails came along and really proved that.
Right.
I don't like to get into debates with people about the right language or the wrong language, and I certainly argue with people a lot about static versus dynamic typing.
Right.
But my point isn't that static typing is bad and dynamic typing is good. My point is most of these holy wars we get into in our field are always cast in the form of right or wrong, or dangerous and safe, or various other things. But it's never really that black and white. It's costs and benefits.
Right. And that's almost the definition of a holy war, right?
Sure.
You basically polarize the positions, and no real meaningful conversation can be had at that point.
Static typing, other aspects of Java have real benefits. There's no question about that. But they also have costs.
Right.
And dynamic typing has a whole different and complementary set of costs and benefits.
Right.
And it's not really a matter of what's safe and what's dangerous or what's right or wrong. It's, do the costs outweigh the benefits of this different trade-off?
Right.
There are quite a few people in our industry doing the kinds of software development where you might not want to shed the safety net of static typing.
Right.
But most people in our industry are doing web development and business application development and things like that, where you need to be at least as concerned about productivity and maintainability and,
Right.
and flexibility. Right. And the cost-benefit equation for Ruby just looks really, really good.
Is this sort of a reaction against is the whole Ruby dynamic typing, co-founder of Relevant, Stu Holloway, a good friend of both of ours,
Right.
I think has put it best when he talks about Ruby being a low ceremony language. It's not really about dynamic or static typing at all.
Sure.
Do you think that Ruby is kind of a reaction, the attraction to Ruby is a reaction against the fact that, we did C++, we did Java, and we got to a point where we sort of put static typing on an altar and said, hey, this is the way God intended programming languages to be.
Absolutely. And there are plenty of people in the Java camp who go so far as to accuse Ruby people of being irresponsible for not.
That goes without saying. Geez.
Well, it's kind of silly. It's definitely a reaction to that. And here's an example that is more along the lines of the high ceremony, low ceremony distinction that Stu draws, that I was talking with somebody about yesterday, which is in the Java world, the APIs and libraries that have grown up around Java through the Java community process and even before that,
right.
Tend to be extremely thorough in trying to solve the entire problem that they're addressing,
right,
and somewhat complicated and difficult to use.
Right.
Rails, in particular, takes exactly the opposite philosophy, and I think it's a direct reaction to that, which is Rails tries to solve the 90% of the problem that everybody has, and that can be solved with 10% of the code.
Right.
And it punts on that last 10%. And I think that's the right decision, because that the most complicated, odd corner cases
right.
of these problems tend to be the things that can be solved by the team in a specific and rather simple way for one application.
Right.
But if you try to solve them in a completely general way that everybody can use, it leads to these really complicated APIs and complicated underpinnings as well, right. that tend to be buggy. So
now the interesting thing for me, looking sort of, being the political science major that I am, I'm always interested in history, right? And this applies to programming languages too. And I remember a time when Java servlets were simple. Right?
Oh, sure.
Where they really sort of kept us focused on, arguably the 90% that everybody needed, and then the remaining stuff you sort of fleshed out yourself. And then we got the template engines, and then we got JSP, and then we got struts, and then we got Spring, and then we got Hibernate. Do you foresee, you may not want to, but do you foresee that the same thing could happen to Ruby?
Oh, it could. We'll see. I hope it doesn't.
Sure.
It does tend to be a language where you can get a lot done with a little bit of simple code.
Right.
And there's another thing that makes me hope, and I know you probably shared this, having spent many years in the Java space like I have.
Right.
When the Rails guys deprecate something, they mean it. And I was overjoyed that Rails 2.0 came out just in the past few months, and some of the stuff that was deprecated in Rails 1.1 is gone. And most of it's been rolled out into plugins that can be dropped in if you still depend on that functionality, but some of it was just, okay, we told you and we told you again, and now we're taking it out to keep things simple and small. Right. And it's not like, it would be a major endeavor to go and rework things to avoid that. Let's do what we have to do to keep the language and the platform simple.
For more information, visit onpodcastweekly.com and subscribe to all our podcasts. Brought to you by the publishing imprints and information portal of Pearson Education.